Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aiden. Thanks.
Yeah, it's very good to have you on. Where are you located today?
I'm at home in Pebble Beach, California.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. So it's a great pleasure to have you on. We were just chatting right before. I mean, again, I think like anybody who's cared to learn anything about management uh, in the last 2 decades has come across manager tools. It's almost like impossible.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, um, like, when did you first start Manager Tools? What was the story behind it?
Yeah. So my business partner and I went to school together at the Academy, served together in the Army, had talked about doing something in management leadership because we saw a wide range of managers and leaders in the Army. In fact, my best boss was in the Army. And I built a management consulting firm. He was a client of mine, very successful, sold it to the employees. And so I was kind of retired 18 years ago, and which is probably too early. And Mike and I were talking about doing something, and he was still working. And we were trying various ways to provide knowledge about management to people, and nothing was really working. We weren't really worried about it. And then for Christmas in 2004, his wife got him an iPod. And he started researching about iPods. Back then, it wasn't all music all the time. It's largely music now, but and he
And
called
so
me one
this
day.
was before Apple Podcast was even
Oh
a
yeah,
thing.
oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah. He thought that he learned about this thing called podcasting, and he called me one day and said, "I know what we're going to do." I said, "Great, what?" He says, "We're going to start a podcast." And I said, "Okay." And then about a second later, I said, "What's a podcast?" And the story continues. In January of that, he then created like a 12-page Microsoft project plan with all the things we had to do, like 6 months worth of work and testing and retesting and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, that was all the technical stuff, as opposed to the actual preparation of knowledge, the management, the script, the guidance, so on. So in January of late that year, I was flying in to serve a client that had kept me on the hook, and they said, "Hey," uh, Mike said, Did you get my email? Yes. Did you read the plan? No, it's too long, too detailed. I didn't. I am not. It was probably my first case of TLDR, and he said, "Well, why don't you look at it?" So I looked at it. I said, "It's just too much." I said, "I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're not going to go through that whole long plan. We're going down to Best Buy this weekend. We're going to buy a USB microphone. We're going to plug it into the side of your laptop, and we're going to talk into it like we would talk on this show we're talking about doing, and we're going to see whether or not it works." And he said, "No, okay." And we did, and it worked immediately. He asked me some questions about management, and just flowed back and forth super easy. We still have that tape, and that was it. And our first podcast then launched in June of 2005, and the day it dropped the day before Apple announced support for podcasts in
Oh,
iTunes.
you're kidding. That's crazy.
We had no idea that was coming. It turns out that there were a lot of folks in Apple in the iTunes world that loved our stuff, and so we got pride of place for a long time on iTunes. So it was just a good part of our success is right place, right time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how many episodes have you recorded for Manager Tools?
I think 1,500.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
insane. What a crazy high number. That's so cool.
And it doesn't seem, when you get into the rhythm of doing it every week, it just doesn't seem like that many. And I have a list of podcasts to write. I have over 2,500 podcasts yet to write for the show.
Yeah, I have no idea how you come up with so much content. It's just astonishing.
Yeah. Well, I spent what 20 years consulting and teaching management, watching managers, developing data on managers. We have a huge pile of data on close to 1 million managers all over the world. And despite the fact that people believe millennials are different, they're not. People haven't changed in 10,000 years, and management hasn't changed that much. Yes, the tools have changed, and everybody talks about how fast the world's getting, but the world's been getting faster for years and years and years. It's always going to keep getting faster. And so, one of the questions you're going to ask me is, does the pandemic change anything? Doesn't change a thing. People are people, and managing is about people, which is funny because I'm not naturally a people person. I'm an engineer. Mike's an engineer. That's why we have so much data. And when people say to me, "Well, I've got this tool and this tool and this tool and this tool," I say, "You're missing the point, dude. It's not about your tools. It's about your relationship with your people." The single biggest predictor of management success is the score your directs give you when you ask the directs, "How much do you trust your boss?"
Hmm.
If you get a high trust score, you're going to be fine. If you get a low trust score, you're going to have to work really hard to even keep your head above water.
That is really interesting. I'm sure that it's not like a quick, one-liner answer, but what do people do to get more trust from their team?
Well, first of all, it's safe to say that a good portion of managers don't know that, or even if they've heard it, they don't believe it because their behavior is around power. Or for more and more people, it's not trust, it's about friendship. And trust is, the reason I say trust is because that's the measure management science uses. In fact, trust is a great way to measure the strength of a relationship. It's the accepted way in the professional world. But there are other people who say, yeah, you need to know your people. And so they say, well, I'm going to be friends with them. And that's absolutely the kiss of death. We have an entire podcast titled, "Can I Be Friends with My Directs?" And the first word of the podcast is no. And people argue with us about this all the time. And they have their anecdotes and we have our pile of data. And the reason why is friendship is a role in human life, and roles come with privileges. And there are certain privileges that are associated with friendship, which are reasonable and normal and appropriate, that are antithetical to the responsibilities we have as managers. And so you can't be friends. And so therefore, you have to build another way. You have to figure out another way to build trust. And the answer is really easy. I didn't come up with it. Sociologists and psychologists will tell you all you have to do to build trust with other people, how other people judge their relationship with you, is based on two simple things: the quantity of your communication with them and the quality of your communication with them. And people judge the quality of your communication with them by whether or not your communication with them is of interest and value to them. And the problem is some managers say, well, I talk to my people all the time. Yes, but you're talking to your people all the time about things that are important to you. You don't realize the extent to which you're dominating the conversation. And so that's why we came up with one-on-ones, or at least our version of one-on-ones. And that's why the direct always goes first in one-on-ones, because if you don't give directs a space to come and talk to you about anything, as I like to say, it could be about puppies and rainbows. It never is, but it could be, if you leave it unscripted. If you do that, directs start to begin to feel like, okay, I'm not completely beneath you. There's a chance for us to build a mutual respect and trust and appreciation for each other, and it works.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. How do people figure out if they have that trust? I mean, can we just ask?
You can actually. It's you're getting a lot of metric stuff, but the simple answer is you just wouldn't want to walk up to your directs and ask, "Hey, do you trust me?" Because they'll all say yes, right? We have a saying here that tell your boss the truth and the truth will set you free. A lot of young people today, it's not their fault. It's not because they're Gen Zers or anything else. It's because the internet is the greatest invention in the modern era. And unfortunately, the problem with all human inventions is it has problems. And one of the problems for knowledge about management or science or anything else is that the cost of entry, the barrier to entry of publishing on the web is virtually zero. Unfortunately, that means anybody can say anything they want about management, and usually it's really, really wrong. We just did a podcast about the internet is dumb about careers. There's all kinds of really, really bad advice about careers, like the advice that your "tell me about yourself" interviewing answer should be 1 minute long. That's just completely, utterly false. I was a recruiter. We've placed thousands of people. It's not. It's supposed to be 4 to 5 minutes long, but it's easier to say that. It's palatable for the audience. So what happens is there are a lot of people out there saying various things about management, and what they say is you should just ask your people. Or another one is it's okay for you to tell your boss when you don't like what your boss is doing. Well, unfortunately, that's just not true. It is true theoretically. It is true if you're my boss, I want to believe that about you, Aiden. That's a good thing. But we don't live, this is not fantasy tools. This is real world. This is manager tools. And if you tell your boss what you think about him or her, and unfortunately, a lot of people only do it when things aren't well, you're going to burn a lot of their respect. And unfortunately, there are a lot of, a lot, not a big percentage, but relative to the size of humankind, there's still millions of bosses who are corrupt, and they'll figure out a way to fire you. But the simple answer about measuring trust is to use one of the many tools that are available now, an anonymous survey, and you must do it 2 or 3 times. So I would recommend doing it once a quarter, and you would simply ask a series of 3 or 4 questions, nothing fancy. A pulse survey is generally what they're called, and I think that's one of the providers. We don't use them, but I've seen them used, and I've seen their data, and it's quite usable and easily understandable. And you ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust your boss? Give you a great example. When we first started measuring trust, this was in 1991. So what is that? 30 years ago. We asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust your boss? And by the way, we surveyed 6,000 people. And if you were a boss, a manager, you had directs who were you knew that your directs were filling it out on you. And you were also filling it out on your boss. So they knew that their score was going to come from their directs. And there were people who gave themselves, the average among bosses was a 7, which is a really high number on a 0 to 10 scale. And the average for directs scoring their bosses was 3.1.
Wow.
And they were flabbergasted. So then we put a bunch of those managers in a test group through 18 months worth of one-on-ones. We basically measured them and followed them and so on. And at the end, the average score of trust from the directs was 5.4. And the average score from the managers, what the managers thought their directs said, went from 7 to 5.1. They had become humbled. They realized they didn't really know them that well. And our data shows basically, as long as you're about a 5 and your direct score is higher than your estimation of their score, you're going to be fine. Now, if you really want super high performing bosses, you need to be at the 7 level. And it's just not hard, but it takes time. If I'm going to develop a relationship with you, Aiden, it takes my time. You can't, there's no tool, there's no technology, there's no, Facebook and TikTok and all this stuff. It's wonderful. It's genius engineering and it's wonderfully addictive, but it does not touch the human heart, the human mind, the connection that people feel. And so it just takes time. Now, what managers say is, I don't have time. And so therefore we have a standing guarantee, which is if you do things our way, we guarantee you will get more time back in your calendar if you do one-on-ones. So half an hour a week for each of your directs. If you've got 10, that's 5 hours a week. And managers rightly say, I can't find 5 hours in my schedule. We say 2 things. Look at your calendar 5 weeks from now. There's nothing on it. Nothing. Everyone's calendar is a desert unless you're an executive. And 5 weeks into the future. This week is impossible, right? We're all busy this week. I like to say people aren't busy, they're urgent, meaning their calendar fills up, in the 5 to 7 days in front of them. So start 5 weeks from now. That's a good general rule for any management guidance, any change you're going to make with management. Announce it and say you're going to put time on the calendar for 5 weeks from now when you have no competition. And then the second thing is we guarantee that if you start doing one-on-ones, you will spend less time managing than you did before. And I have thousands of emails from people saying, you were absolutely right. I thought I didn't have time. I started doing one-on-ones and suddenly the drama, the tension, and the conflict dropped precipitously. When I have a one-on-one on Thursday, the folks that used to come to me on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday with stuff can now wait until Thursday and we discuss it in a basket. Now, if it's still urgent, they'll come and see me. But yeah, that's the answer to trust is communication with your directs. And I really don't care whether you use our one-on-ones or not. I want your directs whom you have power over to feel that they can trust you. Because if I trust the person in power, I tend to feel that they don't have power so much as they have authority. And power is not necessarily a good thing, but authority, I respect authority, right? I don't always respect power, particularly if it's aligned against me. If you can turn that power into authority by spending time with people, the trust scores go up.
Yeah, no, that's a very well put way to approach it, and couldn't agree more on the one-on-ones. Mark, you started the conversation by mentioning, I guess in passing, that your best boss was in the
The Army.
army. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so for you to say your best boss, I'm so curious if you could tell us more about who
Yeah.
that is and why you thought they were so great.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't say that often. We've told his story, Mike and I. He was Mike and I's boss a couple of times, but people don't make a big deal out of it. What's interesting about it is people assume that me and Mike both learned how to manage in the Army, and we learned the stuff that we share in the podcast in the Army. Not true. Not a 0.0% of this stuff comes from the Army. West Point didn't teach us how to manage. It did teach us how to be leaders, but leadership is kind of fuzzy, and everybody wants to talk about it because you can't define it. Management is very specific, very actionable, very measurable. But the Army didn't teach me. When I was at Procter and Gamble, I didn't get taught. When I was a recruiter, I didn't get taught. I really started learning this stuff when I started gathering data from the field. So it is funny that the best boss I ever had. In fact, of all the bosses I ever had, I only had one good one, only one. And it was, and now look, I was young and maybe I didn't know how good they were, but looking back now, no, there was only one good one. And he was so good. Mike and I both talked about the fact that we want the ability to transform people's lives the way this guy did. His name's Colonel Ed Texera. He's retired. He's of Portuguese ancestry. He lives in Hawaii. I think he is the vice chairman of the state emergency defense board or civil response board. He is he's built like George Patton. He took over a unit that we were in, an artillery unit in Hawaii in 1983 that the previous commander had been relieved for cause because he had failed a major tactical evaluation. And the colonel came in and said, "This unit's terrible, and I'm going to make you great." And over the next 18 months, I worked as hard as I've ever worked in my life. And we went from the worst unit in our division out of, say, 50 units, to unquestionably, no one doubted we were the best unit in the division. And there was talk that we were one of the best units of our type in the Army. And it was sheer hard work. I was his adjutant, as personnel officer. I sat right next to him almost all day. He drove everybody incredibly hard, but he was also incredibly honest. He was incredibly clear about what he was going to do. There was no tricks. He didn't keep people guessing. He wasn't like this super genius who couldn't communicate. He was a regular guy, and he told us what he wanted us to do, and then he asked us to do it and do it again and do it again and do it again. And in the first month or two, it was chaos. And then Mike and I started talking about it, how much better we felt about achieving our mission. And we had a real Army mission. I mean, we were deployable, and Mike and I had nuclear codes, and this wasn't child's play. It was the peacetime Army, but we were still serious about things. And the feeling I had from the beginning to the end, working for him, it was transcendent for me. And I'll tell you, he got married while he was the commander, and it was a military wedding. And as his personnel, I was responsible for everything. And he said, "I need to get married, arrange it." So I arranged it. And one of the greatest moments of my life was he asked us to create, in the military, there's this tradition of the bride and groom walking out under cross sabers. And I had to go find sabers, which were in very short supply, but luckily I found some. And then as he came through the arch, I was standing last, and on the correct side. He asked me to be there. And the tradition in the Army is when you marry your bride and she has not been in the Army before, as dependent otherwise, when the swords, as you walk through, the swords come down, and I got to, if you'll pardon my expression, slap her on the butt and say, "Welcome to the Army, Sammy." And both of them came up to me afterwards, hugged me, and said I had done a great job. And that's just a personal thing, but I would take a bullet for him in 2 seconds. He is one of the finest people I've ever known, and he taught me what leadership and management were. And he said, don't assume anything. Don't let any detail go. You don't have to be you have to be detail conscious, but you don't have to be crazy about it. You just need to keep track of things. And when people say they're going to do things, you need to check on things. And then he says, tell the truth and work harder than your men. And he was right. And the feeling in that unit after 18 months, Aiden, we could have conquered the world. And we did that to ourselves because of how he led us. And Mike and I talk about him privately regularly.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's awesome. I mean, that one sentence where you said, "I'd take a bullet for him any day," I mean, says it all. I don't know that most people would say that about their managers.
About their boss. Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't have anybody not even close, not even in the realm of, there was nobody even above 0, and he was at 1,000. So yeah, it was pretty great.
I love that. Mark, do I have it correct that you taught 2 presidents in the White House how to have one-on-ones?
I did. President Bush and President Clinton. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. 2 very different presidents. I had done some work in Washington. My work came to the attention of some people in the White House. And when I was raised, my folks said, if you're living in a small town, if the mayor or the sheriff asks you to do something, you do it. And for a long time, I lived in a small town in Texas, so I followed that. But I figured if the White House calls, you go. And the first thing they asked me to do was help them fire someone. And I said, well, yeah, you just can't. I mean, you can fire them if you want, but there's going to be a political, what storm. And I said, so you need to take some steps. And so I said, I'll tell you exactly what to do. I'll tell you when to do it. And you do it, and it'll be fine. And so they followed the steps. And they fired this guy. He deserved to be fired. It's always sad when that happens, but the only thing worse than firing somebody is keeping somebody who hasn't earned the right to keep their job. And so they did it, and they were amazed that it was just a series of very straightforward steps. No histrionics, no disrespect, no anger. The goal is to have the person feel that you treated them fairly, gave them a fair chance to keep their job. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just a tyrant. And somebody said, somebody senior wants to thank you. And I said, well, okay, great. And it was President Clinton's chief of staff, Mac McClarty. And he said, you're pretty good at this stuff. I said, well, thanks, sir. It's my job. What they'd asked me to do was fairly straightforward, but to them in the political world in Washington, then and now, there's not an appreciation for management, even though the Congressional Institute has been a client of ours for a number of years, and more congressional House offices are becoming more professionally managed. And it's not hard to learn management. It really isn't. Anybody can do it. And he says, hey, can you do more stuff like that? And I said, yeah, again, sir, it's my job. And he says, well, I need this, and this, and I did a few other things. And then he said to me one day, I really need you to help the president. I said, sir, I'd be honored. Tell me what you need me to do. And he says, he needs to communicate more in a more structured way with some of his staff. And so as it happened, I spent a little time with President Clinton, who is maybe the most magnetic, charismatic person I've ever met in my life. No, it's not maybe, it is. He's the most interpersonally gifted human on the planet, in my opinion. And the problem is he's not a structured guy. He's a very creative guy, and he didn't like one-on-ones. And so for a little while, I was going back and forth checking on them. I was living in Texas at the time. But he did them for a number of years. And then President Bush, I had met President Bush previously when he was governor of Texas, and did the same thing. And he did them quite faithfully during his time as president.
That's amazing.
So when managers say to me, Oh, I don't have time. I said, I taught a couple of presidents how to do one-on-ones, and they did them. If the president's busy, you're not. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I think like if anyone ever had an excuse, that excuse is now gone
yeah, it's
after
not.
hearing that.
Yeah, and again, most people's understanding of time is so wrong. They feel this sense of urgency. I'll give you a classic example: email. Email is a scourge. It's a wonderful tool, and it's a scourge on management. And the reason it's a scourge is not because of the tool; it's because of how poorly managers interact. Management is a set of behaviors. It's not a mindset. It's not a personality. I don't care if you're outgoing, you're reserved, you're technical, you're not technical. None of those things show any correlation to high management performance. What correlates to high management performance is behavior, what you do. So the question about email is not how much you get. How much you get is irrelevant. People at Intel, we did a lot of work at Intel, get 600 emails a day. Most managers can't even comprehend that many emails. But the answer is, how do you behave? How do you interact with your email? So I get, I don't know, a couple hundred, 200, 300 emails a day, and I do all my email in 90 minutes a day. Now, if you don't know how, and we have podcasts for that, and I encourage your listeners to go find them on our website, they're all free. Email got dropped into the corporate world when professionals already had calendars and schedules and so on. And email was this thing that it was like having a room full of furniture and then pouring 500 gallons of water onto the floor in a watertight room. All of a sudden, the entire floor, the email's the water. You're walking through the water all the time. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's completely wasteful. What you do is you schedule 3 times a day. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, sometimes it's less. Most people don't need 30 minutes 3 times a day. And you do it sometime early in the morning, not first thing, sometime middle of the day, and sometime end of the day, but not last. And you process email during that time, and you don't do anything else, and you leave email alone all the other times. And you discover after about a week or two that, first of all, you can get to inbox zero fairly easily. You have to be aggressive in the beginning. When somebody says, I need a PowerPoint deck from you or an Excel spreadsheet, you don't do that during the time. You write yourself a task. I've got to do that later in the day. But you process all your email. The vast majority of email doesn't create all kinds of deliverables for you that you have to do right then. And so email is one of those things that makes managers think they don't have a lot of time. I often tell people, look, I believe you have a lot of time. Let's work on email. Let's get email under control. And then you tell me how much time you're willing to give to improving yourself as a manager. And then after like 3 weeks, they're like, it's amazing. It's not amazing. All the people have done it. So yeah, okay, welcome to the club. And I want them to feel that way, because the more time you have to work on how often do we feel like we're not working on our primary thing, right? So there are some things we have to do that are housekeeping that are necessary, and you should minimize the time you spend on that so that you can maximize your time on the 2 or 3 or 4 things. They're going to make the most difference as a manager. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I, for one, am going to check out that episode.
Yeah.
uh,
We have probably 20 different podcasts on email.
that's cool. I
Yeah.
love that. So Mark, you've also, spent time as a recruiter, as you mentioned, and you've been teaching managers about hiring too.
Yeah.
There's this one quote that we have from you, which is that the jobs that you're trying to hire for should actually be hard to fill.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting
Yeah.
quote. I'd love for you to elaborate on that. Does that apply to every job, or do some jobs qualify?
Most jobs, the vast majority do, but there are. Look, we like to say about our guidance that it applies to 90% of the managers in the world 90% of the time. The idea that you can come up with a theory of everything, and put it out in podcasts is probably a little bit arrogant. We don't think that. So no, there are certainly some. Let's consider seasonal jobs or temporary jobs or 3 hours a week doing this or that. Probably you don't need to make it hard. But the problem is several-fold in the case of hiring. The first thing is the primary motivation for hiring is the pain of the manager. There's too much work, right? And so what we want is that pain to go away. But that's not what we should be hiring for. We should be hiring to make our team better, because what you're paid for as a manager is to produce results and to retain your people. And that's, by the way, I didn't invent that. That's standard management science 101. Get your job done and keep your people. You can't burn them out. Most people don't know this, but people wonder, when did unions start? Why do we have unions? When did they start? Well, they started exactly 6 months after management was invented. I'm not kidding. It was invented in textile mills in Scotland, in England, in northern England, a couple hundred years ago. And the owners, the white wealthy male owners, said, I don't want to work in this textile mill anymore. It smells, it's dirty, it's wet, and so on. So I'm going to hire an overseer. And they hired overseers, and the overseers were tyrants because they were told, just make me money, right? I don't want to deal with this. I want to stay clean and nice and be a gentlemanly lord in the English countryside. And so they focused on one thing, results. Well, if you only focus on results, you become a tyrant. It's true. We've even tested it, and in the modern world, and it wasn't pretty. We had to stop the exercise. And the result of that is that unions formed, because you've got to be humanistic, and to some degree you have to be respectful of other human beings. I think that's kind of an entry card to be a human at all. You don't get to, well, I have power, so I don't have to be respectful to other humans, is kind of ludicrous. So yeah, unions were formed for that very reason. Now, because of that, managers are responsible nowadays for both results and retention. Well, what happens is managers have a body of work that has to get done. And when they have pain because the work's not getting done, they think, how can I solve it? And they think, I'll bring a new person in. The problem is the standard they set is so low that person lowers the average productivity of everybody. And that person, unfortunately, some of the data we have shows that it's rare. It does happen, but it's rare that everyone else then will raise their productivity to make up for that person you brought in. So, and what's more, if you hire me, Aiden, but your colleagues or the people who are going to be my peers, if you're going to be my boss, if they thought it was easy for me to get hired, they're going to withhold their trust of me until I earn it from them individually. Right? They don't know me. What if you and I are buds and you hire, we're going to hire this guy. He's great. Well, they don't know me. And you just give me the King's X, Horstman's in. I make what they make now, and they had to earn it, let's say. And they had to go through interviews, and I didn't. And the end result is it takes me longer to get up to speed, and I complain to you the whole time because they're not being friendly. And now you start giving them the business because, they're not welcoming the new guy, when in fact it was all you that was the problem. I did this backwards. I apologize. I should have been the bad guy, and hired you. So look, the first thing is set the bar high. The first thing is, whenever you think you need to hire, the answer is no. You don't need to hire. What you need to do when there's more work than there are people, and let's go back even another step. There are two states of being when it comes to workload and people. Either you have too much work for the people, or you have too many people for the work. It would be great if we could find that perfect match, right? But it just
never
doesn't
happens.
happen. It never happens, right? Yeah. So then the question becomes, okay, which one should we choose? Well, it's been tried, and overwhelmingly, it's not even close. I still have the white papers in my filing cabinet somewhere, that if you take work away so that there's less work, people get up to shenanigans. They're not. They engage in behaviors that are selfish and not in favor of the organizational goals, missions. And you get worse problems and more problems if you have too little work than too much work. So we had too much work yesterday. We lost somebody. Now we definitely have too much work. The first thing a manager is supposed to do is look at the work. Because there's all kinds of work that tends to creep into everyone's lives that is not productive, that's not useful relative to our primary goals and objectives. So if I'm working for you, you got to say, okay, Mark, let's sit down. Let's look at what you're doing. And maybe there's some things that we're not going to do. Now, when I say that to people, Aiden, they're like, oh, no, I have to do everything. I said, okay, I get that. And I actually like that you say that. That's a good professional way to approach your workplace. Good. But, so you're telling me you get your work done every night when you go home? All the work is done? No. I said, well, what's not done? Well, there's a lot of stuff not done. Oh, okay. So then at some point during the year, is it all done? No. See, you believe in this theory that you don't prove every day, and so we ought to accept that the day-to-day life is proof of a different theory. And the theory is there's more work to be done than there are people. So then the question becomes, it's not about the workload, it's about the prioritization of the workload. What's most important? If you're my boss and I'm new, you owe me saying, hey, look, you're going to be asked to do a bunch of stuff. Here are the 3 things you can't miss on. These are the 7. You can make a mistake. It can happen. And if you do that, it makes it much easier for me to schedule my time. A lot of managers are left with really vague guidance from the director or from their VP. And what happens is the manager believes, therefore, not knowing that she could actually prioritize on her own, although with the oversight of her boss, she would end up saying, I'll do all 16 of these things. And she ends up being one of those performers who's spinning plates on sticks on the stage. She's running around all the time, keeping all the plates spinning. What she doesn't know is there are 3 of those plates that the boss considers gold, but she's making all of them equally in danger of falling to the ground. And if you drop one of the gold plates, you're in trouble, and you're in trouble for a long time. So the first thing you should do when there's an opening is say, do we need to hire? And the answer should be no. Can we solve this problem without hiring? Because hiring is expensive. Not only is it expensive in time and effort in the process, it's also expensive because we're going to hire somebody else. Now, there will be people who will say, no, we had 8 before, we have to keep 8 afterwards. Believe me, I promise you, talk to any CEO. The first thing he or she will say, if you ask them, what should I do hire? I don't know. Maybe not hire, and let's see what we can do. And maybe there's some stuff we can kill that you're working on that doesn't matter in the big picture or won't matter in a year or 2. And, you'll be in trouble, but it'll go away. Those are the decisions managers have to make. The second thing you make is, okay, you've done all the balancing you possibly can to help your people get through the workload nightmare, right? We have a podcast about that too, about a massive workload increase, how to deal with it. The next thing you do is you set the bar high. And the way you set the bar high is when you start interviewing. The reason to interview somebody is to find a reason to say no. And here's why. We want to build a high wall around our team, our existing team, whether it's 1 person or 20 people, it doesn't matter. We want the wall to be high to keep out posers. We don't want people who can slip through, who can fool us, who can talk a good story. We want to grill them. And I mean grill. Look, you can be a tough interviewer, ask tough questions, be kind and polite and respectful. It's not hard. I'm not asking you to be a prison guard. I'm asking you to be a polite professional and develop tough questions and probe and probe and probe and probe and look for things that you consider to be problematic, whether you're really looking for somebody who's a team player or you're looking for somebody who's a creative person, or whether you're looking for somebody who's an engineer who can keep their head down and turn out a lot of code. Whatever it is you're looking for, you should ask questions about that. And we have a tool called the interview creation tool. It's available to our licensees, where you answer a series of questions about the job and it gives you a series of behavioral interview questions. But you build this high wall, first thing, to keep some people out. It's hard to get hired by them. Everyone knows it's hard to get hired at Manager Tools. We just hired a new presenter. We're going to hire another one because we're growing. And I interviewed the presenter for 52 hours.
What? 52 hours?
Yeah, because there's only 10 people in this company. He's 10% of the company. He's going to work with me for the rest of my professional life. I'm not tolerating a mistake, and I'm slow to make these decisions. And anyone who thinks they're good at making snap decisions about people is an idiot. You're not. It takes time. And if you make it easy to get hired, people think, what's the old saying? That which we achieve too easily, we esteem too lightly or too cheaply. Heaven knows how to put a price on its goods. Everybody wants to get to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So you build a high wall, and it says to some people, don't apply because you're not willing to go through this process. And if you're not willing to go through a 10 or a 15-hour interviewing process, a bunch of single interviews, no panel interviews, by the way, with a bunch of people, then you're not our cup of tea, because the people who are here, they're special. They're special because they're here. And my job is to make sure that anybody we hire is as good or better than them, and that we will connect with them and we will click with them and they'll be respectful and kind. We don't hire any high-producing, arrogant jerks. This happens all the time. Well, he produces a lot. I don't care. He's a jerk. Fire him. There are two reasons to fire somebody. They don't do their job, and that's ultimately reflects back on the manager, or because they tear down the team, because they're poison, because they spread rumors, because they're difficult to be around. Get rid of that person too. Everyone else's performance will raise. So you make it hard. I don't mean rude, disrespectful. And you could be totally clear about it. And if you, my book, The Effective Hiring Manager, and our Effective Hiring Manager Conference, we walk through all the steps you do. But you build a high wall so that anyone who gets over it, anyone who gets an offer, everyone on your team, and probably even more to that, wow, she got through the entire process. Impressive. She must be good. So the day she starts, she's already earned trust from all of the people who report to you and you, because you've spent hours and hours and hours with her. And look, if somebody says, yeah, I'm not willing to spend that, I'd rather get hired by somebody who's easier to get hired by. Okay, good luck. I wish you well. You're not our type. Now, do I recommend that everybody spend 50 hours interviewing? No. But I'll give you a good example. HR and many places will say you need to have a panel interview. It's the stupidest thing in the world. I say that a lot about a lot of things, but we have data about panel interviews. They're horrible. I mean, they'd make bad decisions, and it's all for the convenience of the company. You shouldn't be thinking about convenience when you're adding humans to your team. This person's going to be cheek by jowl with you for years. You have to be respectful of everybody else and of the mission and of the principles of the organization. So yeah, you should make the job hard to get hired for. It's better to have an opening and deal with that pain than to fill that opening with the wrong person.
That is, I mean, so much wisdom packed in there. There is one thing that I was hoping to drill down on, and this is this concept of like setting the bar high, because I feel like it's also related to the trust issue too, right? Because like if you hire someone that say is not as good as you, then clearly you're gonna double check their work. You're just gonna like it's a not a good start. So
Yeah.
how do you end up hiring people who are better than you, and how can you train yourself to have a high bar?
Yeah, that's a really, really insightful question. Probably you're the first person who's asking that question in probably 10 years. So well done. So here's the issue. I'll start with this. I have a general rule. We have a lot of general rules here because you can't apply every rule specifically to every situation. But my general rule about learning is the moment you learn something, you forget you ever didn't know it. So for instance, you've heard the stories about millennials and Gen Zs and they're different and so on. It's all fake. It's all wrong. They're no different. There's no evidence humankind has changed in the last 10,000 years. Talk to any sociologist, any psychologist, any sociobiologist. I'll tell you, no, humankind's been the same. They're all the same. There's just an industry out there now to tell us that young people are different when they're not, because they can make money telling us they're different. So the key thing to remember is you have to not compare them to you today when you're a manager. You have to compare them to you when you were in that role, assuming you were in that role. That's the challenge. Because when I say to people, you have to hire people better than you, they say, well, that's not good. If they're better than me, they should take my boss's job, right? And so they're worth so much more money, they won't take this job. You're missing the point. The issue is they're better than you when you were them. And so you're going to ask them a series of questions about behaviors, about how what they've done before, and you're going to compare their experience in previous situations where they struggled, where they failed, where they set a high goal and achieved it, where they had to collaborate with a team, where they had to deal with some difficult data, where they had to communicate something that was complicated, whatever behaviors that are necessary for your job. And you have to evaluate them against yourself when you were in that role to see whether or not they're at your level, or are they close to being at your people's level, and with learning they could get to your people's level or above. Yeah, people make that mistake all the time. Oh, I can't hire people better than me. Yeah, you can. They're just younger than you, and so you're comparing them to your old you. And if you ask me how to do that, what's the single best way to do that? The answer is know the job you're hiring for, whatever the job is. Know it well, know it in detail, and then develop a series of questions that ask the candidate, and these are all behavioral interviewing questions, which is the standard in most companies today. If you're not doing behavioral interviewing, you're crazy. It's what's that word? Churchill used to say that democracy is the second worst form of government, and all the others are tied for last. Well, that's the way it is with behavioral interviewing. People hate behavioral interviewing, but all the other interviewing techniques are horrible, including panel interviewing, which is the devil. But you ask a series of behavioral interview questions of the candidate, and you see whether or not they're using the kinds of behaviors that you used, or even better behaviors than you used when you were at that stage of your career. That's the standard. And I've been saying that for years, and it's one of those step functions that happens. People are like, nah, I don't know if I want to do it. They hire a couple people that aren't that good. Okay, I'm going to try what Horstman says. We're going to try the manager tools way. And then we get this email. It's so funny. I get these emails all the time, and it says, because we have millions of listeners, they say, Mark, you're not going to believe it. I tried your stuff and it worked. I write back, why would I not believe it? I mean, by the way, I didn't just make this up. I mean, we have data on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being interviewed. So we know a little bit about interviewing, and we gave it to you for free, but I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. And once you do it that way, you will not go back. It is, in fact, I know a couple of people in the last couple of years who have been told, hey, listen, you're so good at hiring. We want you to staff up this new division. We need to hire 500 people in a week. And they say, no, I'm not going to do that, because there's no way I can apply. I mean, I can simplify things a great deal, but I'm not going to do that, because my failure rate will drastically increase for these temporary workers, and I don't want to do it. Let HR do that, because they'll do it just fine.
So, just given all the data that you've had, what do you think is call it like a hit rate that you can aspire to have? Like, because I think like even the best managers might not, get every hire right, but how good can you aspire to get?
100%.
You can get to 100%.
Yeah, you can. No, look, I'm 60. Okay. I wasn't at 100% when I was 40. But there was a period of 18 years where nobody quit. Nobody left. I hired people and they stayed. Nobody resigned to go somewhere else. 18 years, like 100 people. So in that period, I was 100%. And it was my company. I owned it totally. And, I've made errors since then, a couple. But you make a good point, Aiden. You should aspire to 100%. Now, I'm not suggesting that you be inflexible. There are hires that you make with an awareness of a person's limitations. We're not hiring the second coming, right? We don't need that. We need a high standard above the job that we want them to be in. Because look, if you're believing in a growth organization, the job's going to change in the next couple of years. All jobs are constantly growing and expanding. It's the nature of the human workplace. But yeah, I think you can aspire to 100%, and I think you ought to keep track. Right? How many people have I hired? How have they turned out? Look, I often tell people, managers get evaluated on whether or not the people they hire, not the people on their team, because you might have some people on your team that you didn't hire, is whether or not the people they hire get promoted. That's a double whammy. In other words, I hire you, you work for me. So I not only was the one that brought you into the organization, which, by the way, managers hiring people is the single most important strategic task that a manager is given, because you get to decide who works here, which is a huge thing on the culture. So you hired them, and the second thing is you develop them enough that the organization believes they can go on to the next level. Okay, so that's one of the quiet standards that exists when senior executives are reviewing manager candidates. Whom did she hire that she got promoted? And people always say to me at this point, well, not everybody wants to get promoted. I said, I know, I get that. And that's fine. It's good. It's fine. But for the people who do want to get promoted, just because they want to get promoted doesn't mean they get promoted. There's a different standard, right? And some people want to get promoted and never do. But here's the difference. Managers get evaluated on whether or not they can get their people promoted. Executives get evaluated on whether or not when their people get promoted, they do well in the next job. And people often joke that the hardest promotion in the world to take is going from being a peer to your friends to suddenly become their manager. That's not true. It's not even close. It's not even in the realm of possibility being true. We have data on that as well. The hardest promotion in the world is going from being an individual contributor to a manager. There is a small exception, but the database we have is so small I can't be certain about this. And the hardest promotion in the world is going from any job to CEO. And I'm talking, when I say CEO, I mean billion-dollar company or bigger. If you're a CEO of a 5-person firm, you shouldn't be calling yourself CEO. That's a silly title. And the reason why is because the difference between individual contributor and manager is such an enormous one. If I go from being manager, like you're my VP, so you manage me, and then I manage individuals, right? I manage individual contributors. That's generally what's called a manager. A director is somebody who manages other managers. Once I'm a manager, for the rest of my career, I'll be a manager. Only once do I make the transition from being an individual contributor to be a manager, and that's when I get that first promotion. Essentially, what happens is managers try to get their people promoted, but sometimes they don't do a good enough job. They haven't delegated enough to them, for instance, and so that person fails when they get to be a manager. They were the best performer among all the people that was working for that manager, but unfortunately the manager didn't prepare them for the next job, and so they fail, or they do well enough to keep the job, but they're miserable, and it's a hurtful thing for the organization for a couple of years, because you don't want managers to not be effective. That's really, because it's bad on that manager and on everybody that works for her or him. So what we say about executives is, executives are the ones whose managers, when they promote people, those people do well in the next job, because when you get above director, it's all about people. It's all about people. And yes, there are decisions to be made. Yes. But if you don't have a good handle on people, you're doomed. And unfortunately, one of the problems in Silicon Valley is there are too many individual contributors who want to be managers to have a career, but they don't want to spend time on people. And no offense to Silicon Valley, I've spent years there. I started working for Apple in 1996, I think, and they've been a client ever since. So I love what technology has done for us, and Facebook and Google and Intel and Apple and Applied Materials and Silicon Graphics, and name them. I've been there. And unfortunately, the engineers of the world, like Mike and I, don't always make the transition to realizing their job is really about people.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And we are coming up on time, and there's so many great things. Obviously, everybody should check out Manager Tools, and you have a few more podcasts and resources too, right? Did you do you mind just like listing those out so people get the broad spectrum?
Yeah, so there are 2 free podcasts, Manager Tools every week, and will continue indefinitely until I write all 3,000 of the casts that are remaining. And then Career Tools. Manager Tools is for managing people. Career Tools is for your career. And both individual contributors and managers even can listen to Career Tools, because there's a lot of bad advice on the web, and people go to the web and get in trouble when they follow stupid YouTube guidance about things like how to answer "Tell me about yourself," it's hilarious. And sad too, right? Because you think, well, this person looks like they're knowledgeable and they've never been a recruiter before in their life. Manager Tools and Career Tools. We're about to launch a third podcast, Executive Tools. Now, the only way you can get Executive Tools to be a licensee, one of the things that makes us different is, before we do a show, before Mike and I record a half-an-hour show, I spend 3 to 4 hours writing show notes. Now, what most shows do when they provide show notes is they basically, after the fact, go over and say, hey, at this point this happened, and at this point this happened, and you can
transcribe it.
Yeah, exactly. We don't do that, because if you've ever read a transcription, it's not pretty. So I write the show like a white paper, as if I was writing a chapter of a book, which is one of the reasons why we'll have more books coming out, because we already have the content already written. We just have to put it together. And so the show notes are there. They're usually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages of here's our guidance on this topic, and there's an outline, and then Mike and I use the show notes as a guide, but we don't read the show notes because we've been read to before and we don't like it. And so if you become a licensee, you get access to all the show notes. And the beauty of that is you don't have to listen to me talk for 45 minutes. You can read the show notes in 10 minutes for all of our casts. And I think we have close to 2,000 show notes now that they're immediately available to you the moment you become a licensee. So executive tools, which will be obviously for executives or aspiring managers, aspiring executives, people who want to be executives, that will be a bi-weekly show. Manager tools and career tools are weekly. We also do, we have public conferences around the world. Obviously in the last year, we haven't had many, but we have virtual conferences. You can come to our website, manager-tools.com, and we have virtual effective manager, virtual effective communicator, virtual effective hiring manager. We talked about that one earlier today. We also have the virtual effective remote manager training, how to manage people remotely over Zoom or whatever thing you use. Then we also have a client business, corporate clients. What happens is somebody starts listening career tools and then start listening to manager tools. They get promoted to be a manager, they get promoted again, and then they hire us to come in and train all of their managers. Which is not a strategy we planned. It just turned out that way. And so client corporations, and you name it, Fortune 500, basically emails us and says, hey, I'm a big fan. I've been listening for years. I'm a director. I'm a VP now. Will you please come in and train 30 or 50? The one we're most recently famous for was we trained all 900 managers at SpaceX about 5 years ago, because they're a fabulous organization, but they didn't believe in management. So we put in place some basic stuff, and it's great to see how they've been in the news lately. So you can hire us as a corporate trainer. You can come to an individual conference in person. You can also do it virtually as well. Although we're starting to get more and more in-person events. In about 3 weeks, I go to Minneapolis and Portland. We're hosting public conferences that are filling up rapidly. So
that's amazing. And, thank you for all of what you've done. And, over the last 2 decades, just putting out the resources, correcting the myths and using data to do it all. It's been a great pleasure. And the final question that we leave all of our, guests with, and I know we just talked about a lot of these things, but if you were just to leave the audience with just a sentence or two, words of wisdom, what would you tell them to do?
Good. Well, first of all, it's all about people. That's Horstman's first law. And my second law is more communication is better. And I will also tell you this: we teach tools, one-on-ones, feedback, coaching, and delegation. But the path to being a great manager is not about the tools. If you want to be a great manager, it's about love. And this is not popular to say, but this is the distillation of my last 40 years of my professional life. If you want to be a great manager, you need to be willing to love the work you do, right? That's important, and love the mission of your organization. And you have to love your people too. And by love, I mean professional love, agape, which is the willingness to risk yourself for the benefit of another. When you lead a team of people, it's not about you. It's about the team. If you can make each of them 5% more productive, as opposed to making you 5% more productive, that's more valuable for the organization. Not enough managers understand that you've got to be willing to risk yourself for the benefit of your team and spend time with your team and help them. And if you do so, first of all, rising tide lifts all boats. You'll benefit. And when your people start getting promoted, you will always be the one that got them promoted. So you will be first among equals if you ever work for them, or more than likely you'll get promoted as well. And sometimes you may not even want to get promoted, but that will still look good and make your career that much better. Yeah, it's all about people. And as an engineer, I don't like teaching this. I wish that people would just do what I tell them to do. But I've learned the hard way that it's all about people. More communication is better, and the answer is love.
That's amazing, and a great place to end it. Mark, thanks so much for doing this.
Aiden, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Did I do what you wanted me to do?